built in the background while today is happening in the foreground. That's not going to stop. But there is a difference between a mind that leaves and a mind that knows it leaves. The second one has a moment of noticing. A fraction of a second where the going is visible before it happens. Where you can feel the pull toward the future or the past and recognize it for what it is. That moment is very small. And it's enough. You don't have to be everywhere at once. You just have to be here. For this. If this found you at the right moment, subscribing means the next one will too. And if something landed, what would it mean for you to arrive somewhere today? Not show up. Arrive. Someone just to the left of you. Like you're always almost catching up to a version of yourself that keeps moving just ahead. The life is full. The calendar is full. The appointments and the obligations and the people who need things from you. And something is missing that you can't quite name yet, but it has arrived before. Never when you were trying. In none of the moments when you decided to be more present. It arrived on a Tuesday morning when you were doing nothing in particular. The light was coming through a window at an angle it only holds for a few minutes before it shifts. You weren't thinking about the list or the week or the version of tomorrow you'd been building in the background. You were just there. The coffee, the light, the particular silence of a house before it fully wakes up. Nothing else running, no version of later being constructed, no conversation being rehearsed, just that. It wasn't especially beautiful. It was just a kitchen, just a window, just an ordinary morning that had no idea it was going to matter. What you remember is the quality of being where you were. Not almost. There. That moment didn't require effort. It required the absence of effort, which raises a question you haven't let yourself finish yet. If it arrives when you stop pursuing it, what have you been doing all this time? The presence you've been looking for isn't somewhere you haven't been yet. It's somewhere you've already been, on that Tuesday morning, in that specific light, in the few minutes before the phone pulled you back. You know what it feels like. The question isn't how to get there. The question is what keeps pulling you out before you've had a chance to settle in. The list. The replay. The low-level anxiety that mistakes movement for safety. The habit of managing the present from a slight distance, because being inside it requires a vulnerability you haven't been sure you could afford. But you've afforded it before. On a Tuesday morning, in 4 seconds of light through a window, you have been completely present before. You will be again. And when it arrives, however short the moment, however ordinary, you don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to capture it or hold it or make it mean something. You just have to be in it. And that was always enough. The mind will still go to the list, to the replay, to the version of tomorrow being. Being there means being reachable in a way that costs something you haven't named yet. The mind learned to leave before it could be asked to stay. And staying is something nobody taught you how to do. Which raises the question of what you've been protecting yourself from by leaving. I read Simone Weil once, a French philosopher who wrote about attention with more precision than almost anyone I've encountered, and one idea stayed with me in a way I didn't expect. What I took from it was this. Attention is not concentration. Concentration is effortful, the mind gripping something, forcing focus. Attention is the mind becoming available, present to what's there rather than what it expected to find. That idea lodged somewhere and refused to leave. Because if that's true, if presence isn't something you force, but something you allow, then the effort you've been making to be more present may have been working against you. The harder you grip the moment, the less of it you feel, which is its own kind of irony for someone who has spent years trying to get everything right. Presence isn't a performance. It's what happens when you stop performing, which means the moments when you arrived, when you were completely somewhere without trying, weren't accidents. They were what it feels like when it's not being pursued. You've been there before. You just didn't recognize it as something you could choose. The question isn't how to be more present. It's what makes it feel unsafe enough that leaving became the easier option. The big things tend to break through. The moments of crisis or celebration that demand presence whether you're ready for it or not. What gets lost is smaller and quieter, and in some ways harder to mourn because it never announced itself as something worth grieving. The conversation you were half inside. The meal that passed without being tasted. The evening with someone you love that you can't quite locate in memory now, because you weren't quite located in it then. The version of yourself that existed in those moments. What she noticed, what she felt, gone. She wasn't there to receive it. You've been living alongside your own life more than inside it. And the cost of that, the one that accumulates in a way that never triggers an alarm, is that you start to feel like a stranger to your own experience. Like the days are happening too. Quite there, you're somewhere. The mind doesn't go blank. It goes somewhere, and the somewhere is almost always the same few places. It goes to the future. The version of tomorrow being built in the background while today is happening in the foreground. The conversation that hasn't occurred yet, but is already being scripted. What you'll say, what they might say, what you'll say then. The thing that needs to happen next week being turned over and over, because the mind doesn't know how to set it down. It goes to the list. The one that never fully empties. The thing you forgot to do, the message you haven't returned, the appointment that needs to be scheduled, the person you've been meaning to check on, the version of your life that would exist if you could just get on top of everything, which you almost are, which you're always almost. It goes to the replay. The conversation from 3 days ago that still doesn't sit right, the thing you said that landed wrong, and whether they're still thinking about it, and what they think it said about you. The moment where you felt something shift in someone's tone, and you've been turning it over since, trying to locate what it meant. The mind isn't wandering, it's working. The question is whether all that work is getting anything done, or just keeping the present moment at a safe distance. The absence isn't random. The mind doesn't drift to the future and the list and the replay by accident. It goes there because there is something in the present moment that is harder to be inside than it is to manage from a distance. Sometimes what's hard is the feeling itself, the low-level anxiety that hums underneath a normal day, that doesn't have a specific source, that isn't dramatic enough to address but is persistent enough that staying inside the present means staying inside all of it. And that's uncomfortable in a way that's easier to move away from than to sit with. Sometimes what's hard is the stillness, the moment when nothing needs to be done, when the list is managed and the children are asleep and the house is quiet, and there is nothing between you and the question of how you are. The mind fills that space before the question can fully form. Sometimes what's hard is the tenderness of it, the dinner that is ordinary and good and enough, and something about being completely inside it feels almost too much. Like, your body is at the table, your hands are around the cup, someone is talking, and you are nodding and making the right sounds at the right intervals. But you left about 10 minutes ago. You're not sure when it happened. Somewhere between the second question you answered without really hearing and the moment you realized you'd been tracking the conversation from a slight distance, present enough to function, absent enough that none of it was actually landing. This happens more than you've admitted. The dinner where you were running the week in your head while someone across from you was saying something they probably needed you to actually hear. The meeting where your face was arranged correctly but your mind was already rehearsing a conversation that hadn't happened yet. The bedtime routine that your hands completed entirely on their own while you were somewhere else. Not nowhere, just not there. You show up, you just don't always arrive. And the gap between those two things, between showing up and arriving, is where something quietly goes missing. You respond when you should. Your face does what it's supposed to do. You ask the follow-up question. You remember what was said. You do everything that presence is supposed to look like. And none of it requires you to actually be there. The body learned this early. How to run certain situations on a lower setting. How to maintain the surface while something else entirely is happening underneath. How to be in the room, attentive, warm, responsive, without the room costing anything. It's not deception. It's efficiency. The problem is that efficiency has a texture. And the texture of a life run at a lower setting is different from the texture of a life actually inhabited. Not in ways that announce themselves. Just thinner than it should be. A little out of focus. The difference between a photograph of a place and the memory of actually being there. You've been collecting photographs. Days that passed. Conversations that happened. Evenings that moved from one thing to the next without any of it quite landing. And somewhere in the accumulation of all those almost present days, you lost the thread of what it feels like to be completely somewhere. The not quite there became the default, became the water you swim in without noticing it's water, and you haven't stopped to ask what it's costing you when you're not.